Hi guys, welcome to Oliveboard. This is Aditya. I hope I'm audible and visible to all of you guys clearly. So today I have a very important and special guest with me, Anil sir. Uh, he was the rank one in RBI Grade B examination, worked with Reserve Bank of India. So we are going to get some idea from Anil sir that how was the journey of clearing the examination of RBI, and how was the experience working with Reserve Bank of India. So we'll talk about it. Sir, welcome to Oliveboard. कैसे हैं आप?
Thank you, Aditya. I'm doing well. And how are you?
I'm good, sir. I'm perfectly fine. So, sir, I have lots of questions for you. One by one, we are going to deal with these questions. But before that, I want you to, can you please give a little bit brief introduction about yourself, your background, before entering Reserve Bank of India, what you were doing, what you have done in your education, so all of these, because the student has something in their mind that previous education play very important role in the competitive examination journey. So is that the same case with you?
Sure. Aditya, before we begin, I want to ask the participants a question.
Yeah.
What makes them join the session on a Sunday morning at 11 a.m., disrupting their weekend schedule and the free time that they are supposed to have today?
Nice question. So I think, guys, you have got the question that what Anil sir is asking. What made you to join this session on the Sunday morning? And what came to your mind that on the Sunday morning, instead of doing some extra activity outside or spending time with your family, you guys are spending your important time, precious time here for this session. What came to your mind? What came across your mind? Please write in the chat box. We'll be finding it. We will be finding your answers and putting your answers in front of sir. As quick as possible, you guys will be giving us the answers in the chat box. So be active in the chat box. Sir, it will take some time. वो थोड़ा सा टाइप
Sure.
वगैरह करेंगे. Yeah. So it will take some time. Emojis started coming. Yeah. पहला आंसर आया है हेमंत जी का that my aim to be RBI Grade B officer. Sapna is saying motivation because I am hungry for it. Ayush Kumar, Sethuram. These few are my student actually, regular student. Sethuram. Sir, did you clear this year 2023? Sethuram will be coming with that. When sir have cleared and which year it was, what was the phases will come over it. Don't worry. There will be much more Sundays after this examination. Uh, Swada is writing कि सर एग्जाम के बाद भी बहुत संडेज होंगे. We'll clear it. That Sundays will be better for us. Mostly RBI grade B is the aim. This is what they are writing. Mostly this is the aim. So they are here on Sunday morning with you.
Heartening to see, and of course I'm excited to do this, share some anecdotes which will probably be helpful. Standard disclaimers, like you see at the beginning of a movie or TV show. These are purely fictional. वास्तविकता से कोई लेना देना नहीं है, ये काल्पनिक है. Let's avoid that. I'll try to make it real. I'll be honest in terms of what I went through, and perhaps that'll be helpful. So you asked me about my background, right? And
Yes,
growing up, I wasn't particularly good at anything. So like most kids in India, then obviously I had to choose engineering. So I did that. And even after that, I figured that I wasn't much wiser, much more intelligent. So then I went on to do MBA, which is again the standard course for most people who are trying to figure out what to do at the age of 21, 22. After they've done engineering, they realize that it's not for them, right? So after that, I worked at a firm called Goldman Sachs, as an equity research analyst. I don't know how many of your students have heard, but they do something called investment banking, right? Maybe you would have come across the word in Chetan Bhagat's novels. I wouldn't like to associate with that, but at least a lot of youngsters, try to get their information from some of these. So that's how it is. But when I was working at Goldman Sachs, I realized that my job did not have an impact on the common man. I was always keen on working in a setting that would have a direct impact on the common person in different ways, and that's how my tryst with with RBI or even with UPSC began. And that's how, I decided to, quit my job and prepare for UPSC, and same time also decided to appear for RBI because I was keen on crafting, that role for myself where I would be in public policy, either, focus on, say, financial inclusion, on economic monetary policies that will help, right? So that is what prompted me to, get into this. And to your particular question on whether the, prior educational qualifications give you some advantage, to an extent, yes, but the way the exam is designed and the diverse backgrounds that people come from, there is not much of a head start anyway. So even somebody who is, let's say, not working, for a bank, who is not preparing for civil services, who has not done MBA, can equally do well, excel in various phases of the examination, because what is more important is how well you are able to adapt to the changing nature and how abreast you are of the events that happen around you, rather than what is present in a textbook, right? So that, I believe, plays a bigger role. So whatever little head start you have, if you are from some of those fields that I mentioned, they certainly give you, but that is something that should not make you necessarily complacent, or not having that should not make you afraid of a large distance that you supposedly need to cover.
Okay. Two questions that I want to take from the student side, viewer side. Question number one is, in which years you have cleared the examination? This RBI Grade B examination, in which year you have cleared? And second, it was in my mind that while after writing the examination, did you thought that I will be rank 1, or even leave the rank 1? Did you that confident that yes, I'm going to clear this examination? It is done from my side, and I am assured. Means I have seen the candidate; they are confident. But if I'll pinch them, that are you really confident that you will be having your name this year? So a little bit self doubt is always there. So do you had the self doubt after writing this, and when you see your name on the rank 1, did you thought that yes, it was there in my mind sometime, or it was there in your mind somewhere that yes, you can go to the rank 1 also?
Okay, so let me answer it in two ways. First is,
Yeah.
I cleared this in 2018. And so fortunately, unfortunately, or, say Murphy's Law kicks in, right, at this point. And what happened was, when phase 1 was scheduled, there were heavy floods in Kerala. So, the phase 1 was conducted again for them. That led to some delay in announcing of results for, phase 2. And also phase 2 happened within a, short span of time. Then there was also a long gap between, phase 2 examination and results, if we take prior benchmarks and all that, right? So most of my anxiety at that point was because I did not know what, this process seemed a little opaque, and I did not know what would happen at what stage, right? I could only have information about what happened in the prior years and say, that is the expected line I went by, right? A week later, we'll get phase 1 results. 2 weeks later, we'll get phase 2 results. Then interviews will begin, and so. But at every stage, there were delays, right, largely due to extraneous factors. And at that time, I was preparing for this alone. I didn't know anyone else who was, right. And then that means a lot of information, gossip, whatever it was. I never came to know any of it, but I was still hoping that there would be, even after, say, phase 2 results. If I remember, I think it took more than 2 months to get the call letter for the interview, right? And of course, even after the interview happened, there was some gap before the results were declared, multiple challenges. So while I knew I had done well in phase 2 and I was happy with the way interview went, I never expected that I would be rank 1. So that did come as a surprise, because I didn't have a way to look at the relative part of it, right? But I was reasonably confident of the fact that I would clear.
Okay.
Right. Because one thing I do, pride myself in is the fact that I am able to perform well during interviews. Right. That confidence, something I have always, carried on in various
Yes.
facets, whether it's
That positivity
for
should be
admission.
there. Yeah. That positive vibe should be there for every aspirant. I personally feel like until unless you will not believe on yourself, I am going to do good. I don't feel you will be able to do good until unless you don't have that self-confidence that yes, I made for it, I will be able to do that, I'm putting the efforts and I can crack that. So yeah, I got your answer. Like it was there in your mind that yes, I'm going to clear the examination because the phases went well. I put my efforts, but rank one was a surprise. Am I right, sir?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
In
So
fact, sometimes
yeah.
what happens is, as I said, due to these
Hmm.
delays, you also
Hmm.
immediately after the exam is when you would want to see, okay, look, let me look at the key, let me look at what answers were right, let me try to
Hmm.
introspect on, what happened during the interview. But after a while, you move on with your life and they say, jab hona hai fir hoga, right? There is limit to
Hoga.
it. I've done everything that
Yes.
I need to do. This is done. Let me wait for it. And then let's look at what happens post that.
Correct, sir. Correct, sir. You said me like after being there in the corporate world, you decided to prepare for UPSC. Then what made your mind to pursue career for Reserve Bank of India or to make your career in the banking industry, if I talk about?
Yeah. So now RBI is something that I've been reading about, hearing about since the time I was a boy, right? For
Hmm.
example, I met Mr. Rangarajan, right, who
Hmm.
was governor of AP
You
around
met him
97, 9.
personally.
I met him personally. So then when I got to
Oh,
read
wow.
about
He
these,
is one
then
of my
later
idol,
on when
actually.
absolutely, and then of course I had privilege to meet him again at
Yeah.
RBSC, and so that was like a fanboy moment, and
Hmm.
but same thing when, especially when you're a little older, you start reading the newspaper, right? 2008-9 crisis, how RBI handled that, and then even before that, East Asian crisis. These are things that India has managed to handle in a deft manner without too much damage. So all those things were something that I was particularly keen on, like just economics,
Hmm.
financial. As I said,
Yeah.
inclusion is something that
Hmm.
I'm still vocal proponent of it, and there's a lot that we need to do on that front if India has to, right, move from this low income, low middle income to middle
Low
income,
middle
upper middle
income,
income, and so
developing
on,
to
right? And
developed
then
nation. Yeah.
yes, so which is why I thought if one route I found was that civil services, but otherwise RBI was the perfect foil, if not for UPSC, in order to achieve that. And so, which is why I, decided to appear for it, and thankfully I did, manage to
Hmm.
succeed and be part of the institution for a few years.
Okay. So, sir, definitely when you decide to prepare for a particular examination, there is a syllabus, we have to cover it in time, we have to practice for it. So, were there challenges in front of you when you started preparing for the RBI examination and how you overcome them, how you fight with that hurdle to clear the examination?
So for me, I think focus is the most important thing.
Hmm.
Given that each person today who is in this journey is doing multiple things at a time,
Okay.
prepare for UPSC, prepare for RBI, right? And then there will be some amount of overlap, but each examination needs its own dedicated set, and somebody
Yes.
may be also preparing along with job, along with
Hmm.
studies, various things that go on otherwise as well, right? So focus becomes paramount for me,
Hmm.
and the way I designed it was phase one. It's important to clear the cutoff, right? Sectional cutoff, overall cutoff. That is something I should be able to do. Have a buffer so that no matter what how the day goes, I should be
Hmm.
able to do that. My focus is it should not. So let me rephrase it and say that my endeavor is to ultimately succeed in the examination, not excel in a particular phase, but have that, well-rounded view of it being, in multiple phases or laps, and understand that it's a journey. It's not going to happen overnight, right? So even let's say, for example, interview, right? Your interview preparation does not begin the day after, say, phase 2 results are declared, or the day after you get your call letter. It begins on the day that you apply to this examination, right?
Perfect.
Whether it's phase 1, phase 2 interview, it's the same approach.
Correct.
Then I did an assessment of where my strengths lay, right? At each of these phases. For example, phase 1, now math, quant is something that I can do well. That is what I wanted to maximize. I wanted to spend more time on these and less time on general awareness, because that's a vast one. And I can only bank on certain things that I am confident of, and I shouldn't spend, too much time as well on that, right? So having a clear understanding of where our strengths and weaknesses lie and how we improve the weaknesses is the first thing that I did, right? For example, general awareness, where it's more of trivia. Right. So in terms of trivia, now there is one thing that I would like to tell your students, and that has helped me, is the brain remembers through repeated exposure.
Correct.
We have a session today, and of course, like a few have ever, we'll have sessions every Sunday. Now let's assume we don't do that and we meet 1 year later. Now, what happened today is something which is a long lost memory for you, me, and everyone else who's part of this, right? So revision becomes critical, right? If you're spending half an hour reading current affairs, spend 5 minutes what you did the previous day. Once a week, don't read anything new. Just focus on what you've read during the week, right?
Yes.
And if you are like me, for example, I can tell you Rahul Dravid's 36, Test centuries, 12 ODI centuries, date, ground. But when it comes to, say, like what happened yesterday, what I read in school, what I read in, engineering, I won't remember any of it. Right? People can recount the movie made 2 hour, 35-minute timestamp. This is what happens.
This is what happened. Yeah.
But when it comes to knowledge that does matter, we fumble on it because we don't pay adequate attention to it. Right?
Correct. I always say to my student, I take the general awareness part in Oliveboard. So I always say the thing which you said, I am easily able to relate with each and every point, because this is what I do on a daily basis. I say them how you are able to learn a song of 3 to 4 minutes of a movie without any confusion, without any overlapping. Each and every word will be there at the place. How the song was written. It is not written by you. It is written by someone, composed by someone, sung by someone, and you learn it easily because revision. You have heard it so many times. You recall it so many times. That is what your mind is so powerful. If you want to uh, learn the current affairs also, watch a video once, download the PDF, or just revise it at least 3 to 4 times in the same week. It should not take more than 5 to 10 minutes for the revision of that particular session. But the time you will revise, it will help you to definitely make a very good grip over this particular subject, which is a very difficult part for most of the aspirant in banking or RBI examination, which I have seen. So,
Absolutely.
if I'll come to
And Aditya,
yes, sir.
just
Yes, sir.
just just one
Yeah.
more point. We covered phase 1 and interview. I just wanted to touch upon phase 2.
Mm.
And now that of course there is subjective element, you're expected to write answers. This is
Yeah.
where I think answer writing is again important, and which is neglected. I am also guilty of it to some extent when I was preparing for UPSC, because we spend a lot of time reading and trying to assimilate information, but not necessarily in the presentation part of it, right?
Presentation part.
And again, unless it happens in a habitual manner, it will not be effective on the day of the examination, because whether you have a 10 mark, 15 mark answer, there's a certain expectation, right? Your answer should be constructed in a 150 to 200 word format. So you will probably present, it needs to also have a structure, an introduction, a body, conclusion. Now, it's not that people would not necessarily know anything about the topic, but are they able to recall the right facts that can substantiate their argument? And are they able to do it in the time frame that is allotted? So this becomes a challenge, which is why my prescription is that it needs to happen in a regular manner. Pick up one topic. Anyway, all of you would be reading a newspaper. There is an op-ed section. You do that every day. Now, whether you are reading an editorial piece, whether you are reading an opinion piece, you try to summarize it in your own words, condense it, right? You are reading the opinion piece of, say, 750,000 words. Your gist of it in 150 to 200 words, right? That is what matters. How are you able to gather? How are you able to gather
Sir,
facts?
for the yes, sir. Sir, you were talking about the phase 2. So, like you have done MBA. So, there were subjects during your MBA, economics, finance, management. So, what these subjects, knowledge of MBA was helpful during the phase 2 examination?
It was, as I mentioned earlier, it was helpful to some extent because at least the theoretical aspects are something that you are aware of, right?
Yeah.
But for example, now let's say there is a question, right? What is the difference between transactional and transformational leadership, right? So if I were to recall 3 points, I would be able to do that. But for me to provide concrete examples, take examples from corporate world, look at what's happening around me, that additional factor still will come from my awareness about what's happening around me.
Correct. So, when you were talking about editorials and all, they make things easy if you are aware about the surrounding, if you are aware about the things which are going on in the financial sector, economical sector. I got it. I got your point, sir. Okay.
Because
sir,
there are two, obviously, look at what the job entails, or look at what the examination is also designed to test you on. It is designed to test you on whether you are able to apply those aspects.
Correct.
Textbook se leke likhna hai is not the purpose of the examination. And those are things that you will not be rewarded for.
Correct है. आप theoretical जो book में लिखा हुआ है same to same statement, if you will just repeat it there, so I don't think there is something extra what we are doing. हमने वहां से लिया है, यहाँ पर dump कर दिया है, तो marks भी उसके according ही आएंगे फिर तो. Correct है sir. Mock test का sir कितना role है? What is the role of mock test in overall preparation journey, and how important mock test you feel in your life for clearing the exam?
So to me, mock tests are non-negotiable, right? Because they provide that fertile playground where you can experiment and you can fine-tune your strategies. As I said, right, when I started out, I said, okay, this is what I'm good at. This is how much time I'll spend. This is where, I'm going to focus on, right? And once you start attempting the mock test, that's when you will, improve your understanding. Okay, maybe I thought something was my area of strength, but maybe it isn't. I need to work on it more, right? Or I realize that, for example, this happens usually with, logical reasoning when you have sets, right? You pick up something and you are not able to solve, you spend time on it, and then, obviously there's an opportunity cost. Ek to there's obviously a time crunch that is associated with the exam. Correct. I need to look at, right? Obviously, I will not attempt, but I need to look at, say, 200 questions in a short time span, which is a challenging task, no matter what the difficulty level is. But even in that, for me to be able to meaningfully understand whether I'm able to answer a question or not, I need to give sufficient time. अब मैंने ये किया, मैंने 10 मिनट लगाया 5 क्वेश्चन का सेट करने में, फिर मेरे से नहीं हो पाया, right? So in 10 minutes, maybe I could have solved 6 or 7 other questions, standalone questions. Correct. Right? So this judgment or decision making is something which will improve with mock tests. Correct. Because it's not just, again, because Rahul Dravid is my favorite cricketer, just even commentators would say, right? Well left. Now, well left is not something we see with baseball and other things, but that becomes very important in competitive exams. Because one, the time I spend and negative marking, both, right? There's an opportunity cost associated. So it helps in understanding refining how do I allocate time, which questions do I decide to answer, which questions do I decide to leave. But where I think students will get more from mock tests is if I'm writing an exam of 2 hours, my analysis should be of at least 4 hours. Where I go back, I look at each and every question. It's not, so there are two things, right? We will attempt, say, 120 out of 200. We would have not attempted 80. And those reasons, as I enunciated earlier, मैंने नहीं देखा हो क्योंकि टाइम नहीं था, मैंने देखा हो बट मुझे समझ में नहीं आया क्या करना था, मैं देखा हो उस टाइम पे मुझे याद नहीं आया. These are all realistic scenarios, right? But even out of 120, it's we don't have an accuracy of 100%, right? Let's say our accuracy is around 75%. That means we got, 90 right, we got, 30 wrong, and then we look at this. Okay, 30 mein kya hua? I guessed without knowing what happened, or I did not recall, again, which happens during the exam, or I made some silly mistakes. Now, I really, I find it difficult to make peace with a silly mistake. If I knew something and I should have answered it right, why did I go wrong? Right? Even in the questions that I answered, we should look at whether we answered in the optimal manner. I did something, but if I took 2 minutes in a 120-minute examination, that's not the optimal way to do it.
Correct.
So it's important to look at each and every question, go back to the drawing board, and then, figure out how I'm going to do this better at the next time. And one thing that is helpful for me is look at each, say, Oliveboard's mock test as the RBI exam. Look at RBI exam as the final Oliveboard exam.
This line is good. Correct. So some students were asking also, sir, how to do the analysis. Sir, I have already given a clear idea like how to do the analysis of your mock test. It is very important to analyze and understand like on which questions you are able to perform good in all the mock tests. Because in the examination day, you are not going to get the time to solve each and every question. It is your judgment. It is your decision on that day. I'm going to pick this one. I'm going to leave this one. I always put one statement before the examination in front of a student that it is not which question you are going to do in the examination will give you success. It is your decision which question you are not going to touch in the examination will give you success. When you are confident that I'm not going to touch this question or this type of question will give you success in that particular exam. Right, sir? So this is what you will get from the analysis of mock test. Coming to the one very important phase, sir, and I love your statement when you said that interview preparation should be started from the day when we fill the exam form. How was your interview? When you started preparation, what were the questions asked in your interview?
Okay, so this will be a slightly longish answer. I don't know if your students are prepared to hear because I love to talk. I can talk for hours together and they'll be cursing me for, probably wasting their Sunday morning. But again, to give you real life, that simulation of what happens, right? And then obviously I told you everything that went up to the interview phase in terms of delays and not having enough, information about what. And then one thing I would like to suggest overall is one, drown out the noise. There's a lot of rumors that go on in terms of, how interview happens. Interview comes with a lot of phobia, right? मतलब कोई बोलता है stress interview करते हैं, ये करते हैं. Interviewers will ask tough questions, will give you liberal, marks. Interviewers will ask you easy questions. That's not a good sign. They'll be stringent in scoring. I've never found in my experience any of this to be statistically significant. Right? So first thing is a clear understanding of what your strengths are and to attempt to lead the interviewers to your areas of strength. Right? So usually interview begins with, and then this was, I think, I was probably the last person to go in. Right? And then there were probably 14 others. And that day morning, people read up a lot, governor speech here, monetary policy statement here, do this here, do I remember this, do I remember that? To me, it's not helpful in doing this at the last moment. It's more important to compose oneself, and say that, okay, this is what, I'm going to, answer on. Where I don't know something, I'm confidently going to say, I am sorry, I don't remember, or I don't know.
Yeah.
If it's again trivia, if it's fact-based question, you don't remember, it's perfectly acceptable to say that you don't know.
Correct.
Right? Because one thing is, the interviewers are smart enough to figure out whether you know or you don't know. When you are out of your depth, please be humble enough to accept and say, this is right. They won't penalize you for it. But if you do pretend to be smarter than you are and trying to present an argument, and again, interviewers are people with 30 years of experience in various fields. They've seen all this. They do this, every year. So it's about showcasing that you have a well-rounded personality, you have the ability to think critically, and you are able to present in a meaningful manner.
Yeah.
Right. So I go in, I'm the last person, and then we start with, okay, this is almost lunchtime, everybody's hungry. Right. We start with, okay, why are you here? What have you done? And then obviously, because I did MBA, worked at, Goldman Sachs, so things started from there. And a lot of those things. Obviously, those are things that I could, confidently answer. What my job was, what did I do, how did I do it, what is the process, and so on in terms. And then obviously they'll then, bring you to the aspect of what brings you to RBI, what motivates you, and that's the standard answer that people give anyway. But here, I think that's what makes a difference, right? How are you able to connect these two? And in terms of the role that the understanding you have, and how well it connects to what you have done previously, right? For example, my job at Goldman Sachs obviously gave me a lot of, even before that MBA and all those things, gave me a lot of, insight into macroeconomics, partly microeconomics as well, but macro, because as a central bank, that's the right focus is more on that. And then also in terms of financial, modeling, analysis, how that'll be helpful. So these are, but irrespective of what one's background is, there are elements that we can connect to, right? And so therefore, there's a lot of questions also on, again, what motivates me to, apply to this job at RBI, what would I be doing, and so on. And there were definitely questions that I didn't have answers to, right?
Okay.
There is a question on what do you understand by Twin Peaks regulation? And I hadn't heard of that phrase earlier. I said, I'm sorry, I don't know what it means. Right. So then obviously, if they're interested in eliciting an opinion from you, they will explain, right? Okay, this is what it is. How do you think it works well? And it was more about having, for example, in India, we have different financial sector regulators, right?
Correct.
Whereas UK has a model where, it's more integrated. So something like that. So it's all, but there's a second line of questioning that happens where, they want to understand how well you are able to articulate, how well you are able to assimilate information, present arguments, and also have that stance that, yes, this is what I believe is the right thing to do. And then there are enough issues for them to probe you on, right? Which is where, whether it's phase 2, whether it's an interview, it's the construct is the same. The introduction, my arguments for it, my conclusion, right? And therefore, when you are asked these questions, what I like to do is I like to take a pause and I ask the interviewers, can I think about it? And then I have, say, 15 seconds or so where I say, okay, these are 3 things I like, rule of 3 things I would like to speak about. And this is how I end my answer. It's always important to end your answer. You can't leave it hanging and say, हाँ मैंने बोल दिया, inflation इतना है, food का इतना है, gas prices का इतना है. What should the government or RBI do now? If I don't tell them, then it's not helpful.
There should be conclusion.
Absolutely.
Right? Nice, sir. We got the idea about the interviews. I don't think students find it long. They are finding it quite interesting, each and every conversation which we are doing. Now I'll be moving to the next question which I have. RBI Grade B examination is quite demanding. What was your mindset throughout the preparation for clearing the examination? Although indirectly you talk about it, but I want you that what a successful candidate have in the mindset while applying for examination or clearing the examination? What is the overall mindset during a journey of exam?
So I would like to slightly modify the question and say we are discussing about the examination, but I think the motivation comes from the right reasons. Am I applying because I want a cushy job, I want perks, I want this, or rather am I applying because I know what the job entails and I know I can make a difference to it and I derive job satisfaction out of it by doing my job in a thorough manner, right? And one of my favorite, quotes, and of course, in terms of inspirational figures, Martin Luther King, who said that if a man is called to be a street sweeper, he should sweep streets even as a Michelangelo painted, or Beethoven composed music, or Shakespeare wrote poetry. He should sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will pause to say, here lived a great street sweeper who did this job well. So it's not necessarily about, see, clearing examination is just one aspect of it, right? It's also about building a career. What do you do after it? So that has to be for the right reason. That I have a passion, I'm able to channelize it in a manner, and I'm able to, then help both organization and myself in that process, right? Because all these are then tangential and they will anyway come with the job. So that is the first thing, right? And of course, at that point, as I mentioned earlier, it's about ultimately clearing it, what is required. It's not about focusing on one particular phase alone. You have to be good at different, let's say, subjects or topics within each, phase, and also at the overall thing, right? So consistency for me is more important. And so I am not the one who would say it needs 4 hours, it needs 5 hours, it needs 6 hours. It requires whatever time it requires, but consistently, if you are able to do 2 hours and you are able to work on all the 3 phases, simultaneously, that is what will help you. And to me, what was, as I said, right, because it, overlapped a lot with UPSC, that was more challenging because I didn't clearly know how to, differentiate where I would, spend time and all this, which is what I dedicated 2 hour slot, right? This is what I would do during the 2 hours. Some days it would be mock, some day it would be, preparing, reading, right? Writing to some extent. But this is, I think, the overall vision that we need to have, and we need to stick to it. And a lot of it also comes with, us being too experimental in terms of, okay, I take 5 sources in order to get my current affairs. That's not really going to be helpful.
Correct.
Right. So it's important to, in terms of, for this job, any, thing that we deem to be difficult and we are trying to pick up, perseverance is the key. So it's easier to build if you make it a habit. So the consistency aspect that I spoke of, and you do 8 hours one day and then you don't touch for a week, that's not helpful. Split that on a weekly basis. And even if I say 2 hours to begin with, if 2 hours is tough, then start with half an hour, make it 1 hour, make it 2 hours. You start doing things repeatedly, it becomes easier. And then it becomes more, mechanical. You don't need to force yourself to do this.
Correct, sir. After selection in RBI Grade B examinations, sir, what were the roles, responsibilities, your provision period, adopting a new role? What were the things came to you, and how you adopted all the new things?
So as I'll go back to that timeline that I showed, right, where delays happen at each phase and all that, and even between the results being declared and finally joining, there was substantial gap. And one thing that I did during that period, which helped me, which I would do otherwise as well, is read more, right, about RBI, about, again, the business economic news itself, right? And so the training period is in fact quite intense, in the sense that there's a lot that goes on where you are given an exposure of what happens internally. You're also given some academic exposure, again, largely to do with whether it's accounting, whether it's financial planning, whether it's macroeconomics, all that. And that's, crammed into a short span. So that is something that can be helpful, but that's an ongoing thing. So I wouldn't stress too much about it. I think it's more about the skills and qualities. And once you join, you realize that there is a need for, and obviously that need cannot be overstated, in the sense that it becomes crucial, attention to detail. Attention to detail, even for a student who's appearing for this exam, is important in terms of accuracy, right? As I said, silly mistakes, I need to avoid that. It's more of attitude that you take to the workplace, right? How thorough is my job, that it doesn't need second, third, fourth iterations, right? That learning curve has to be short. ऐसा नहीं कि मैं आज, obviously there are things that you will learn on the job, but I can't take, say, 2 or 3 years and then say that, my noting is still not right, where it's being, corrected and said that it needs to be revised. You need to, write in a particular manner. So that becomes important. Having said that, I was placed in Department of Supervision, which encompasses a wide range of regulated entities, and one of the most important departments and one of the most important functions that the central bank performs. Banking, non-banking, cooperative bank supervision. So where all these play an important role, and you can see it on a daily basis. Plus, supervision becomes important because RBI's mandate is to protect interests of depositors.
Correct.
Right. So if I go to a bank, I need to see how sound, how resilient the bank is. And where are loopholes that I can try to find out and then plug, because I want to avoid that potential loss to an individual depositor to systemic, stability. Right. So these are two aspects, and then how it now boils down to each function or each activity that a bank does.
Correct. Okay,
right?
Sir. Got it, sir. So moving to another question, the next question, because we are running actually out of time. So now we have to just plug into the next question. The question is, you got the job which was RBI Grade B. If I'm there in the preparation of banking examinations from last 8 to 9 years, and I have seen that my students, those are working on the position of SBI PO, few of them are branch managers. Still, they are trying to figure out that how to clear this examination. And I want to become RBI Grade B officer. After becoming RBI Grade B officer, you decided to plug into corporate. How RBI Grade B exam help you on your in your new journey, in your new role, and what is now your role in your company? What you are doing at present?
So Aditya, like I mentioned, one thing that I found to be helpful throughout in my journey, especially in the professional sphere, is that attention to detail, right? The need for having systems and processes.
Yes, sir.
Right? Now it's debatable कि कहाँ ज़्यादा है, कहाँ कम है, speed क्या होनी चाहिए, but there's a structure and we work towards it, and that's flexible, right? So that's one thing that I learned at RBI, which obviously plays an immense role at where I am today, which brings me to where I am today. And this is, I'm working as head of product strategy at Bureau Identity. It's a startup. It's into identity verification and fraud prevention. And I know it's an obvious question to most of the listeners today in terms of why I decided to do it. It was more a personal decision where I felt that there was more that I could do on the outside, and like that impact, could be, or that feedback mechanism is faster, right? In terms of what you do and how it, changes things around. So that plus some other, family commitments, all those things, led me to do that. But the endeavor, that passion for public policy, for doing something that helps people on the ground, also in, streamlining policy, that's obviously something I still have, and I hope to, play a role there in the future. But it's more of, as I said, if we, go back to that phase where I said what happened when I was working at Goldman Sachs, and, more about this, job satisfaction, how meaningful, how does it help change life of somebody, and so on, right? So that's the trigger. And like maybe your students are a little young, but this movie Hazaro Khwaishein Aisi, and there's a song in that, Bawra Man Dekhne Chala Ek Sapna. So that's something I resonate with. I'm trying to constantly, find that. But nevertheless, the exposure that you get, the training, mostly on the job, that you get at RBI is something that will help you deal in number of settings, right? With different types of stakeholders as well, whether it's internal, whether it's external. So to articulate and present your viewpoint in a persuasive or convincing manner, do it with facts, get the facts right. These are things that, that I always, cherish.
Correct. Got it, sir. So, apart from academics, sir, what do you feel that if you want to give the suggestion to the candidates, those who are watching the session at present, apart from academics, what are the qualities or what are the things, skills which are required to be succeed in this examination, RBI Grade B examination?
So there is, when we began, right, we asked this question. So what makes you wake up on a Sunday morning, do this, attend this, and all this, right? So I think it's a question of having the right attitude, right? And making sure that you do your best, right? And obviously, we discussed this even for the interview, but in general, self-belief is something that will propel you during tough times, right? And those are things that we may not necessarily be prepared for, right? As I said, there are multiple stages when there can be some amount of self-doubt, but we always look back at times when those challenges arose and we were able to overcome due to perseverance, due to that fortitude, right? So these are skills. And of course, as I said, one thing is attention to detail becomes important in any job, right? No matter what you do. And of course, those who are already working will be able to appreciate it more, right? You mentioned somebody who is already in banking. Anything that you do, it cannot be mechanical, right? A mistake can be quite costly, right? And as I said, it's more about consistency rather than, like having burst of, that motivation where you do things sporadically, right? And it's to be successful, I think it's more about avoiding stupidity rather than chasing brilliance.
Got it, sir. So, sir, the last suggestion to the freshers, those who are planning to write the RBI Grade B examination, because they want you to give some last suggestion. Although if I will listen this overall interview, I can make a strategy very, very clearly and properly. Like I have to study at least 2 hours a day. If I'm studying 2 hours a day, I should be consistent instead of reading 8 hours a day and after that I'm not touching the book for next 3 days. So that will not work. 2 hours a day if I'm working daily, that will definitely give me edge over the examination. So I'm able to make the strategy. But in the last, if I'll say you, can you just give a last suggestion for all the people, those who are planning to write the examination this year, that what they should do?
Okay, so I think again we'll start at how we organize ourselves, right? Okay, one we spoke about, let's say even if it's 2 hours, how do I distribute my time or allocate time in this 2 hours, right? And then initially to begin with, of course, if it's for freshers, I think general awareness is not something they should neglect. So I would dedicate half an hour on a consistent basis for general awareness. And over time, I think it will get shorter anyway, right? But at least to begin with, and plus that 5 minutes revision at the end of the day. I would dedicate an hour to grasp the theoretical concepts. Right now, there are many textbooks, right? That whether it's in the notification or whether Oliveboard somebody prescribes. Again, stick to one textbook. There is no need of doing multiple things. So stick to one textbook, and also once you do this, maybe at the beginning you probably attempt mock say once in 2 weeks, and as you get closer to the exam, you do it more frequently. So 1 hour there and half an hour, which is again for making a sincere effort towards writing stuff, right? Whereas first half an hour is more for just absorbing information, and maybe the last half an hour is where you can dedicate for reading a piece of op-ed and then summarizing it or presenting your own view of it in a condensed form, right? So that's the way I would structure, because that then takes care of your phase 1, phase 2, as well as interview when it comes to that stage. Because the way to be successful is not to be overly fixated on any one aspect of it, right? And even when it comes to even when we look at phase 2, whether it's economic and social issues, whether it's finance and management, whether it's English, we need to do well in all 3 of them, right? It's not enough if I do well in one of them, right? And I said we already looked at some of the questions that are asked that are expected. Now, for example, Basel III regulation, right? If you are preparing for this exam, that is something that everybody would. But to say that why, so there's a context to it, right? Basel III is an evolution of Basel II. There were some flaws in Basel II that Basel III tried to rectify. And then how it's not enough to say what are the pillars, why has something been adopted, how we have done it in order to suit our needs. Because if you see, there are some distinctions between what are the universal norms and how the Indian
RBI
financial
adopted
system
them.
has adapted it. So these are nuances that will come from having that holistic view.
Correct.
Where I am trying to think of, okay, what is the relevance in this exam? What am I expected to know out of this? It's not about cramming that, yes, these are the pillars, these are what it is. I'm moving from an internal framework to an external benchmarking framework. These are all, pieces of information. It's about how you stitch them. And if you look at number of people who attempt phase 2 and people who are called for interview, that ratio is quite small anyway. How do you stand out among those who are attempting, where given that 90% would have the same amount of information?
Okay, so I think student got an idea that in the last how you can start your preparation. What should be there in your mind when you are actually moving in this journey of preparation for your examination of RBI Grade B for this year or next year? Sunil sir, thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving so much wonderful session to all the candidates, those who joined us on the Sunday morning. And I definitely wish that you will come back after a while when the student will be there after clearing their phase 1 examination. If we need guidance for phase 2 and when we need guidance for interview, so especially we can definitely plan the session based on a particular section of the examination, that phase 2 or interview also. So we'll plan it in future, sir. And I wish I'll be able to pull you back for the session so student will be able to get the guidance again from you.
Thank you, Aditya. It was wonderful interacting with the students, and I am actually pleasantly surprised that so many turned up on a Sunday morning. They also had questions, and I hope it was of some use, and excited to do this on a regular basis and add that delta to your preparation, and that will help you succeed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.